Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. It's being a show where I talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the season finale of Riverdale as well as the latest episode of Krypton. Like always, if I'm talking about something you want to listen to, you can always look in the description down below. I include a time when I start talking about each of the respective shows. So, for example, if you want to hear what I say about the season finale of Riverdale, you can skip to what I say about this week's episode of Krypton. But the first thing I'm going to talk about is the season finale of Riverdale. A great season finale. I love what they did because we kind of like a lot of stuff went down like in between episodes. It would be neat to have seen it, but I do like what they did. That basically you're getting a story kind of almost like for Jughead's perspective of like, oh yeah, like we missed everything because Jughead was out the entire time, but he gets caught up. Basically, the fight against the Ghoulies did not go well. The Serpents are kind of disbanded, basically. Like, a lot of stuff, a lot of the Southside property kind of got burned up during the fight. This is Jughead's first time hearing about the whole Hal situation, about him being the Black Hood, and it's like, holy crap. So much after just waking up and finding out, like, things did not go well. It's so sad too because I was hoping it was a dream because at the beginning it shows Veronica, Betty, and Archie like in front of his grave and like basically it's having the message of like coming back to us, and it's like he did. So I was like, thank goodness. That would have super sucked. But a lot went down this episode. It's kind of like, all right, let's find out who was the guy that was behind the attack at when they were giving their speech at the town hall, as well as attacking Fred at his house. And it's like, oh, turns out, who was it? None other than damn Tallboy, potentially. I mean, who's to say Tallboy exactly did it? I mean, it makes sense that he would, but it turns out, like, oh, the sheriff is like, oh yeah, he went to a gunfight, he's dead. So, which begs the question, like, was Tallboy really behind this? Or did he just, like get wiped? Like, was he just kind of used as a scapegoat? Did they track him down, kill him because he was already an issue before? They're like, oh yeah, we can just pin it on him. So it most likely was him. I mean, let's not forget him and Penny were connected too. So when he got outed, Penny got outed too, and it was kind of like, well, she's back in town, so obviously he might not be too far behind. But it just could be the situation that Hiram kind of tracked him down too. So poor bastard. Probably got offered a lot of money to do it, and it's like it meant nothing in the end because you're an idiot if you try and play along with Hiram, because to Hiram, everyone is a piece on the puzzle. That's even something Veronica was talking to her mom about, because it's like, because everyone's like, yeah, there's no doubt that Hiram had something to do with those attacks. And Hermione at first is kind of like, no, there's no way. And she's like, Mom, open your eyes. Like, we see how far Dad is willing to go. Is it really out of the question to think he would orchestrate that entire thing for the political purposes? Yes, he probably wouldn't have the intent of you getting hurt, sure. But obviously he's going to use it for whatever he can to try and gain whatever sympathy he can towards you and stuff like that. We've already known how he plans things out. So it kind of... I'm liking the direction that they're taking Hermione. It seems like, for her, it seems like she's playing both sides in the sense of like, it seems like she's almost like a double agent, because she's about helping Veronica get the leverage on her dad, but at the same time, like playing along like she's completely okay with it. Cause I think she knows that this is her best option right now, because the last thing she wants to do is be on Hiram's bad side. And I think at least in her position, she can do whatever she can to kind of like diffuse a lot of situations he might cause. Like, he might cause some big problems. Maybe she can kind of like downplay some of the ripple effects, maybe, potentially, I don't know, because it doesn't seem like she's all into this whole thing just because she now sees, like, Hiram for who he is. I think she's starting to see that completely, and maybe that'll kind of influence things. It kind of makes me wonder, is it going to be her and Fred in the future? Once again, it turns into that weird situation. It's kind of like the whole Alice and FP situation is kind of weird, because it's like, well, to be fair, your mom and dad kind of had a thing in the past, still kind of have a thing now too, but you two are a couple too, so it's kind of like a weird situation where it's like, it's literally the same situation, because Hermione and Fred had their thing, but then there's also like Archie and Veronica, so... basically, everyone in Southside basically was holed up in the White Worm because all their homes were gone. None of them have enough money to leave. Interestingly enough, we end up also finding out apparently some of the Serpents actually joined the Ghoulies. It's like, holy crap, they literally beat the crap, almost killed one of your top people, that being Jughead, and you side with them? Like, to be fair, it's that dog-eat-dog world. Someone recently talked about using that in the wrong way. But so nevertheless, it's kind of survival of the fittest type of situation. So it's like, I guess whatever you can survive, it's like, oh, you want to join the winning side type of thing. So Interesting things kind of were set up too. Like there's the whole Penelope situation. It seems like she's kind of a terrible mom, but she cares on some occasions because she knew what was going to go down in a white worm, which, she was telling like Cheryl not to go, which I don't know if that was part of her plan. I feel like why would you bother telling her that if that was the case? Like on some level she does care, but you have Cheryl doing the whole like, oh, like I'm kind of like emancipating myself to a certain degree, kind of making it so that Nana Rose is kind of her guardian. So it's not really emancipation, she's just switching who has rights over her. And it's like you choose that senile bag as a better mother than me. It's like, really? After everything you've done? That's last season and this season, all the conniving and evil stuff that you've done and continue to do and going to be up to in the future, and you wondered like, oh, I'm a bad mom. It's like, really, come on now. So yeah, I don't know. It's hard to say where she sits in all of that. So a lot of interesting things kind of circle around the Coopers this episode. Obviously, it didn't turn into what I thought it could potentially be, but I'm curious to see what happens in the future. It's the whole Betty situation. Obviously, you had people outside of her house kind of like taking pictures and stuff. It's like, oh man, this is where the Black Hood lived, and obviously Alice kind of trying to deal with it. It's kind of making her like, obviously she's kind of riled things up. She's like, go ahead, welcome to the murder house, because it's like, I mean, it sucks, but that's just kind of how things are because of just. I mean, like, I feel like we've only seen the beginning steps. I feel like in the future there could be a lot more at stake with Betty's whole situation, because it's like their lives will never be the same, because like their lives were forever flipped upside down. And it scares Betty on multiple levels, because it's like she's always scared of the darkness inside of her. It's like it flows in her family and it's in her. It's like she kind of wonders, it's like, is that her destiny? Which Jug is like, you have darkness in you, I have darkness in me, but that doesn't make you inherently a bad person. Your dad and your dad's dad and his dad were all like, that's their own situations. It comes down to circumstances. You were very different. Because for Betty, she blames herself for everything, because she's like, I claim to be the greatest detective, but she's like, I was literally sitting in front of a monster this entire time, and I just couldn't see it. I wasn't willing to see it, and I call myself a detective, and it's just kind of sad that, she kind of feels that way. Like, I think Jughead brought up a good point. It's like everyone has a little bit of darkness in them. Everyone over the course of the series has shown the darkness in them kind of shed a little, light, kind of come to the surface. So she isn't the only one in that. But I think in Betty's case, it's like she feels like her darkness is a lot worse considering all that is done. It's like Midge died because of him. Moose almost got killed. So many innocent people. Yeah, there were some bad people along that way, but there was like Fred getting shot. Like, it isn't justice. It's just kind of, So that ends up making her confront her dad, which I thought was kind of a really nice touch, because for her dad's situation, it's kind of like she faces him and it's like, I am not you, and I never will be. The fact of the matter is kind of saying goodbye for the last time. Almost I wonder, is it supposed to be a reference to it? Because he's kind of in a similar cell, but it's almost kind of like it's kind of weird reference to use, considering I don't really know it that well. I know a little bit because of the TV series Hannibal, but it's almost kind of like a Hannibal Lecter situation almost, and it's just kind of like, you have no control over me. Was she trying to talk? And I love what they did with the audio, just making it kind of fade out and then completely getting muffled, so she's not listening to its words. But immediately my brain goes, she will have to come back to her dad for help. Like something in the future is going to happen where she's going to have to come to him for help. I don't know what exactly. It might be dealing with Archie's situation, which I'll get to later on. Might have something to deal with that. Something that could potentially happen in the future. Maybe it's something connected to Alice, but something's going to happen, and maybe she's going to start dealing with the darkness inside of her. It's going to trigger in a different manner. And because we did have Jughead offering her to be his queen with the serpents. Like, obviously, she was kind of tiptoeing that way before, but now he's like giving her an full-on offering to join the serpent. So the question is, like, would she do it? I mean, she has darkness in her, and like, will joining the serpents bring that out? Would it be better for her not to be one? Because obviously, he was kind of, it's like, oh, this is two lovers caught up in a moment of passion and stuff. Like, I was kind of halfway expecting him to kind of propose to her. I thought that was, I guess the argument could be made in a way, it could be that seen as that. But nevertheless, I'm curious. I got the inkling that that's going to come back around, like her having to have a sit down with her dad, so we'll ultimately have to see. What's also interesting is the whole Polly situation. I thought that was kind of interesting. She's like, oh, we have to forgive father. It's like, forgive him for all the terrible stuff he's done? It's like, because if we don't, we'll harbor all that hate and anger, which I can understand that. But the fact that she said, I was like, but he killed people. Is that, should you really be that? I don't know. I mean, to be fair, that's not just Polly. That's just kind of a thing. Some people have that in their mind too. Like, it's kind of like the right thing to forgive people, because if you hold on to all that sadness and anger, it's just going to eat you up alive, you know. But we see the thing at the end with Polly, like, Mom, I can introduce you to someone who's going to help you out with all, like, you know, because obviously, you know, because like I said, Alice's world went upside down because it's like she found out the truth about, you know, her son Chick. We still haven't seen that, so it makes you wonder, like, is Chick still alive, or is his body just somewhere else? Because they never found him, so let's not forget that. We do know that her dad's the Black Hood, so that's a question still kind of left unanswered. So Chick might still be out there, kind of might be a danger who could potentially come back and strike, but we'll see. But she found out the truth about that. She also found out about how, I'm sure things between her and FP are just in that weird stage, so it's just like her entire life is turned upside down, so she's a little sad. So I'm sure they're always going, like I said, they're going to suffer for this in the future. Not that they deserve it, but it's just going to be, it's sadly the outcome that happens with this situation. It's like, oh, you know, like Alice is always who she's so vocal about things. And it's like, oh, you didn't happen to know that your husband was around being a serial killer or something. So, but the fact is that Polly's all acting the way she is. It's like, yeah, she's bringing a cult leader to Riverdale. And that's definitely not going to be a good thing. Like, obviously, I'm curious to see that's going to be probably a big storyline element next season, potentially, too. It's like I said, a cult leader kind of coming in, trying to, for what purpose exactly? We don't know. Maybe he'll kind of be his own thing, but because it's kind of interesting, because a lot of the Polly storyline is kind of off on his own, mainly because the actress who plays Polly is something I've been bringing up multiple times. It's kind of been off doing Once Upon a Time because she plays Robin Hood and Robin Hood's daughter, essentially. So it's just kind of, that's probably partial a reason, but it's also like, that also kind of gives setup for like, oh, some stuff happened while she was going. It wasn't like she was just going doing nothing. It was like, no, she set up some story of her own that is going to be interesting to see that kind of tie into Riverdale. So I did like, what else went down this episode is Archie and the others, obviously, like the Serpents moving out of Southside, moving up to the north where they could kind of have homes, and this where they're going to stay. You know, Fred throwing like, you know, a get together, FP shows up, the Serpents are there. Like, it's two worlds no one expected to kind of collide. And then you have Archie kind of leading, like, hey, Principal Weatherby, we know you're not much of a bad guy, but even you, we can't be a part of a school if it's going to be like turning against people for their respective reasons, just because of their circumstances, because they're serpents, you're going to kick them out. Because apparently all the serpents would be moved to a different school. Also, we ended up finding out, I almost completely forgot, Fang is actually alive. They bullshitted that. I was like, wow. That's crazy. Like, I mean, it was just more so reason to feed their anger, and it kind of all fell into the trap, but was not expecting that. You had the whole Mayor McCoy. I love, like, because it's kind of interesting, because Mayor McCoy was always in that place where she was kind of a villain, because, I mean, to be fair, it's just because of the whole mayor situation. It's like, you can't help but, like, especially in Riverdale, it seems like you can't help but kind of being in that, like, that dirty spot. Like, even if you have the best of intentions, you just kind of get a little dirtied up because of it. But it's nice seeing her, like, helping Fred out, like, oh, how he can win, helping out Veronica with the whole money situation. So what was interesting, too, is the deal that Hiram made with Veronica. It's like, you give me back Pops, and you can have the White Worm. But it also meant signing over basically a lot of her power amongst the lodges. She basically can't get a cent from her dad in the future, basically. She's kind of cut off, both financially now and in the future, because basically she has no more stakes in what is lodge industries and everything that's a part of the estate and stuff like that. So that sucks. But Veronica made that deal because it's kind of like, I'll make this sacrifice for the greater good. Because getting back Pops, because it's something that Jughead and a lot of people talked about, like Pops is the centerfold of Riverdale. It's not just a place, it's a place where they can all be, but it's just like, it's a staple of Riverdale. And the moment Hiram took that, it really started showing his control over Riverdale. But the fact is, there's this one more spot in Riverdale, which obviously Hiram doesn't think much of it. It's like, well, I've got all this other stuff, but he doesn't realize how crucial Pops is to everything. Like, that gives them a home, a place to call their own, a place for them to plot, to rebel, you know. It just takes one spot, you know. Everyone's got to have their hideout, you know. So I like that that's kind of an element they're kind of like, you know, making Pops into, because it's kind of the spot, you know, they rendezvous at anyway. So it just kind of, it's nice that they're kind of spinning it like that. Easily one of my favorite moments is when Archie confronts Hiram, and it's kind of like, the fact of the matter is, all the terrible stuff you've done, I can't prove it, but the fact of the matter is, I will keep an eye on you, because he's like, I know you're behind everything that's happened. The second attempt on my dad's life, just all the terrible stuff that you've been a part of. You're the reason why Jug, my best friend, almost died, and he's got the knife in his hand. And he's like, just know that I will, one day, I'll keep an eye on you, and I'll be able to prove it. And when I do, I will come for you, and then I'll get my bones and stab the knife. I'm like, and I love it that even though Hiram is this mobster, even he got scared by what Archie just did, and then you saw him kind of getting a little uneasy. So that was a very nice touch. You had Archie winning student council president. We didn't see Ethel. I'm curious to see how she feels about this whole situation. I mean, everything going forward. We know Ethel had her big issues with Veronica, in particular Lodges, but Veronica's kind of at war with her dad right now. And kind of, on the fences with her mom because, like I said, it seems like her mom's kind of playing, she's double aged up right now. It's kind of what I'm trying to say. I don't know I'm messing up like that. Sorry. So I'm curious to see what that all kind of means going forward. We do kind of see the foundations laid out for Hiram's plans about Riverdale going forward. It's like, okay, the Ghoulies going to work the streets and be kind of the muscle on the ground. Claudio's kind of supplying the drugs. Penelope's kind of doing the brothel thing. Penny's kind of running the Ghoulies in the whole drug situation, and then he has the sheriff kind of dealing with things on that front. So it's like literally every avenue of crime he's kind of got covered, and he's got a sheriff in his pocket to kind of let things kind of be played out the way he needs them to be. So if anyone tries to snoop around too much, shut them down while also kind of giving leeway for all that to happen. So we do see that the Serpents are down, but not completely out because Jughead has taken over as the full-blown leader of the Serpents, and it does look like Cheryl has joined them, their ranks and got a special jacket on her own. Of course, it has to be in red just because Cheryl is like, I look good in anything, but she's also got to make sure she stands out too. So that's kind of interesting. I'm very interested to see where that goes in the future, like the whole like Cheryl being a part of the Serpents. That's definitely going to be interesting. Like I said, even Cheryl has continued to always kind of flip-flop a lot because it's just kind of like, obviously she's been dealing with her own things. But I think subsequently, since her and Tony started going out and stuff, it seems like Cheryl's kind of found that equilibrium and she's kind of dealing with her own family situation. But I think she's in a good space. I mean, who's to say that still won't turn around? I mean, Penelope might still be up to something in the future, but we'll see. Final nail in a coffin for this episode was Archie getting arrested for the kid that the dude that was robbing them when they were on vacation, and it was who ended up killing him. Now Archie's being arrested for that murder because now you have Hiram decide, because they're too much of a nuisance. They're the ones that kind of keep circling things back. It's like, especially Archie being a big problem because it's like, oh, you knew how, because that was something Archie touched on too. It's like, you knew what kind of state I was in. I felt weak and powerless, and you took advantage of me and you manipulated me. Archie kind of sees that now, and now he's being arrested just because it's like, now he's slowly going to be chipping away at their group, knocking out, Veronica, Betty and Jughead. They're kind of the biggest issues for his. Now this is also going to mess with the morale of everyone else because Archie, together with everyone, helped bring this all together. And now that he's kind of going down for potential murder, dude, things are going to get crazy. Do note, at the time I'm recording this, I do not know if this is getting renewed for a third season. I hope it is. It needs to be, because I was like, how are they going to spin this? Like, obviously, I really love that because it's like Cliff was just kind of like the main antagonist of season 1, and obviously season 2 set up the Black Hood, which he's kind of been dealt with. Now we see Hiram kind of stepping into the fray as the main antagonist, but not just him. He's got his own generals. He's kind of like the main boss of a video game with his other minor bosses, general bosses underneath. It's just kind of an interesting thing. I'm so curious. I'm probably, out of anyone on that group, I want Penny to be taken down the most after everything she did, the Ghoulies and everything, manipulating Jug this season anyway for kind of being who she is, causing the most problems. This all started because she was manipulating Jug, and then she tries to blackmail him into doing stuff for her. I'm curious to see what this also means, like I said, like getting arrested and stuff like that. What does that mean for Archie's reputation and stuff like that? Like I said, he balanced it before. He was kind of all good in season 1. Season 2, he kind of struggled back and forth, but it seemed like he found his grounds at the end of this season. But now it's like, where's Archie going to land next season? Like I said, with all this, where's anyone going to land? Where's Betty going to land? Her whole situation with Jughead. Like I said, that was something I went into this season being like, yeah, I knew that was going to be a big part, like their relationships, just a complicated like situation the four of them are growing together, but also growing apart over many different things. I'm curious to see what season 3 had, what kind of challenges season 3 has for them, because it looks like all the cards are stacked against them in this situation. With Hiram having all the power, obviously Hermione's kind of being, even if she wanted to help, she can't really help too much because she's being held out of the loop because she is mayor now. So they can't take any chances that, any of this kind of falls back on her. So she can't really know all the finer details. So I guess when she's kind of surprised or she can act very surprised when things kind of go down, so. Also completely forgot to talk about this episode too. Seemed like Moose and Kevin are going to be a thing now too, potentially. Also might mean that Moose might come out more, because that whole like him and Kevin thing, he kind of kept that super secret, I mean, to be fair, it's kind of like a very emotional time because it's like, yeah, a lot of Midge's stuff was messed up because of like, the riots and stuff like that. So I don't know, we'll see where that kind of all takes us. Like I said, I'd love to see what they do with a third season, what it would have in store for us. And now moving on to this week's episode of Krypton, a great episode. A lot of interesting things went down, so let's break everything down bit by bit. First of all, sad because you had the whole Lyta and Seg situation, which I mean, at first it's kind of like, yeah, they're with each other, and then it's kind of like, oh, because she works with Zod to try and retrieve Doomsday. Interesting enough, good on Jaina for doing it. She's the one that convinced Seg to move Doomsday. It's more so because like Jaina, last episode told Seg like, yeah, don't trust Zod. He's kind of in this for his own reasons. So it's like we can't, so always knew that this was a possibility. So they were trying to move Doomsday the entire time, which is great. And the whole problem is, it's like, oh man, like he knew Zod might do it, but he wasn't expecting Lyta to be the one helping him, which is it's that sad situation where it's like Lyta's thinking like, no, this is the best option there is. It's like we have no means of killing the voice of Rao because anything else on Krypton has been unable to do it. Plus with Brainiac on his way, like this might be the best option. But at the same time, even she admits, it's like, well, what about afterwards? We'll be next on the food chain after Doomsday gets done with potentially Brainiac, and it's like, no, it's like we'll get it in the stasis unit again afterwards. It's like, man, oh man. Interesting enough, we also find out that Zod is in fact Seg's son. I'm like, what? I was like, dude, that makes him Superman's uncle, which is like, I don't know if that's ever been a canonical thing. Maybe it has. I don't know. Once again, asterisk. I don't know comic books, but that's still a nice twist. I had brought that up before. Like, that'd be kind of interesting if that was the case. Like, because that's what made this whole situation. It's like, oh, a Zod and an L coming together. And it's like, oh, wow. Which is kind of sad. I mean, it kind of makes sense why he is the way he is, because it is a combination of like both conflicting ideals, because the L's, in his words, more idealistic, whereas the Zods are more about action. They're willing to do what is necessary. They are willing to make the hard choices, in this particular case with the whole Doomsday situation. So then, like, because even like Lyta's mom, Jaina, was kind of like, don't follow him. Like, the fact of the matter is his Krypton will be ruled by fear, which, like, are you hypocrite? All you've ever done is filled my life with fear. What made me feel like I was never good enough for you as a daughter or good enough to be a Zod. But for her, it's like, the reason why she thinks like that is because that's the way she was raised. That's how her father kind of raised her, to kind of be ruthless, to cut out her feelings. And obviously, so she passed that on. It's just kind of like, sadly, just she was perpetuating just a family trend, but you were kind of like the outlier. She tried to essentially cut out your heart, and you kept your heart. And she's like, this is the time for you to keep it. It's just, I'm really liking what they're doing with Lyta, because it went a direction I wasn't expecting. I figured things between her and Seg would kind of go the way they did, but I wasn't expecting it to be like, under these circumstances, it's kind of like she's siding more with Zod in this whole situation, even shooting her own mom. To be fair, that was to keep her mom from killing him. It was a fight to the duel, and that's just kind of like the Kryptonian way once it's kind of been set in stone, but it's just, she wanted to make sure her mom was stopped without killing her. Because if she wanted to, she could have easily have killed her mom, but she shot her just enough to weaken her. But still, even Zod kind of got pissed because it's like, oh, you dishonor me. Because, I mean, that should also show you something too. Like, He took on your mom so he can take over her power as Primus, because that means when this is all said and done, that doesn't mean he's just gonna, I'm gonna pop back into my own time period. It's like, no, when it's all said and done, I'm gonna stick around and kind of run things from here forth, which is gonna create a whole paradox situation. Not unless he was planning on leaving and he was just gonna put his mom in charge or something like that. I don't know. It's just kind of an interesting thought, but it's kind of sad because now Lyta feels like she's against everyone now. It's like she's against Seg, she's against her own mom, but I guess in her mind, it's like she thinks that this is the right move to make, especially after everything Zod's said to her before. It's so interesting because I feel like the Lyta before us isn't Lyta in front of us. Is kind of the Lyta that her mom created. She isn't 100% the Lyta that we knew it before, as well as even the one that Seg loved. It's just kind of interesting, especially because that just means the further Seg and her get apart, the more him and Nyssa get close. I did not see that coming, which begs the question. It's like, well, we know what their baby's supposed to be, but it's like, are we going to change that up and make it so that she's actually Jor-El's mom, which is going to be interesting, which also means that Zod and Jor-El are actually half brothers. That's crazy to think about. But that means that's Clark's uncle. That's an interesting, because it's interesting because Zod was always kind of like in some, the little bit I know about him, it seems like he's always come as a friend, if not kind of like a mentor in some cases, obviously because he knows a lot more about Krypton than Clark does. But it's just kind of, like I said, that's more so in the Smallville storyline, because that's why I said some, because most stuff just kind of depicts him the way he's depicted, and Man of Steel just some kind of douchebag coming to kind of take control of things. So, which he kind of placed that role up in this too. It's fascinating. I thought it was kind of neat the way Seg is kind of feeling, because Seg is like, only thing I'm known for is being the grandfather of Superman. It's like, that's kind of like, and ironically, it's funny because it's like, he's kind of like set up in this whole, it's a hard legacy to live up to, which is interesting considering the fact that you're his grandfather, yet you have to live up to his legacy. Because for Seg, he feels like, how can I be the one to save the world? Like, my grandson grows up and becomes a Superman who saves the world's universes, and like, how can I live up to that? But his grandfather Val, the computer program, reminds him, it's like the sigil they own is the sigil for hope, which is interesting. I didn't find. Maybe that came up in Smallville, but I definitely didn't remember. I feel like Man of Steel was the first thing I ever saw, Superman canon-wise, at least to my knowledge, that really pushed that whole, it's not an S, it's the L, it's the House of L symbol, which represents hope. That the fact of the matter is, it's like, that didn't just happen by accident. Your ancestors chose that, and you, all who followed in that line, have defined it. The fact of the matter is, in a time like this is when you need hope the most, because hope can be such a powerful thing. And I think that could be a situation that you could make the argument that might be Lyta and Zod's situation, is they don't have hope. I mean, because that's what Superman represents. He himself is a beacon of hope. But, I don't think Zod necessarily looks at anything like a beacon of hope. He just looks at things that, it's like, this is his world and it's not in a good enough shape, so I'm going to rule it with an iron fist. I'll rule it to kind of shape it. It's like Superman doesn't rule Earth. He protects it because he wants to be the hope that gives people the strength to rise up when the time came. And Seg was doing that this episode when he got both sides coming together. He got the Black Zero as well as the Sagittari to come together. Enemies, people, conflicting ideals coming together for the purposes of stopping the voice of Ra. I mean, sadly, that kind of blew up in her faces. I figured it was going to end blood. I thought he was going to just kill them all, which he kind of did. But basically, he just fed on their brains. It's like, he's very good at manipulating people. I guess it wasn't going to be easy to use Seg like that, because Seg was so focused on his goal that he wasn't going to be pushed aside by fear. Like, the reason why they turned on each other was because of, it wasn't even just, it was more so, wasn't it the Black Zero people that turned on? Because it was because of the fear of because when it was all said and done, they were going to turn on each other anyway when it was all said and done. It just kind of happened sooner, so that kind of sucks. But I even love it because it's like, even when it's all said and done, this is like, I believe in you, which she came through and saved the dead, and she saved Seg's life, which is like I said, it's like, like I said, it's crazy how things play out, because I was so certain, it's like, oh man, she's going to just use you, Seg, and it's like, no, where she stands right now, it's like, actually, she legitimately cares for you, she kind of has, and she believes in you, which is kind of it's hard to believe. It's like, wow, even Lyta kind of doesn't do that, which the argument could be, well, Lyta does, but this is just kind of believing is kind of what Zod said. They're idealistic. They have their ideals, but it's like ideals aren't enough in this world, you know? Which Saga's trying to change that, because I have my ideals and I'll lead it by action. I will give hope, and hope is defined by my actions, you know? So it's just kind of interesting how it kind of like all played out like that. Interestingly enough, too, there was a dude that was running around the place. I was like, is that going to be Adam? And it's like, no, it's not Adam. It's actually Jaina's brother. I kind of had a feeling like, I mean, he was left out there. I mean, who's to say so I guess he's been wandering the tunnels the entire time. I mean, he's probably been out there wandering around surviving. Maybe that group brought him in. Like, I'm just curious. Like, I mean, maybe we'll get that in the next episode. Like, but it's kind of interesting to see that he's alive. And it also says a lot to the fact is that he was still willing to save Jaina even under these circumstances. Like, he hasn't seen his sister since she kind of left him to die. But to be fair, he tried to kill her first. So, cause she tried to offer, I mean, that's kind of another thing too, because like she tried to, I think that's even more so why Jaina tried to push Lyta in this episode, because it's like she had the opportunity. She was just like Lyta, but she killed her heart. You know, especially when it came to her brother. It's like, no, we could share this mask, but her brother was like, no, we can't do that. And so he tried to kill her first. Like, he kind of cut off his heart first. So those events kind of led to Jaina being who she is. So I think it's because Jaina herself, like, she made the wrong choice back then. And now she sees that Lyta is potentially going down. It's like, I don't want you to make the same mistake I did, you know? So, like I said, it's just interesting development. So I'm curious to get back to that. And speaking of Adam, it didn't click in my head last episode, but now I think it finally does, like where he ended up. I can only assume that's Kandor City in the future, like after maybe a potential future where Brainiac has already captured it. Because remember what they said, like, about Brainiac? He'll keep everything frozen the way it is, and that person's frozen and their eyes move. It's like, because he left the city frozen in perpetual. Because I was kind of thinking like it'll be stuck in some kind of time loop. They get their lives forever, but like maybe like thousands of years go by and it almost feels like a day or something. Like, I thought something like that, but it's like, no, they are perpetually frozen like dolls in a play set, essentially. So I think that's where Adam ended up at the end of the last episode. I think he traveled to, I mean, to be fair, because there's that whole situation of like, well, I guess because it did take him, you can only assume it took him either to the past or the future. I can assume with the circumstances now and with the retrospective, it's like, okay, he went to the future. I mean, this is where he was. He was on Kandor. So obviously probably like activating it, like he probably didn't have a set destination in mind when he activated it. So it just kind of blew him into the future. Or maybe like the explosion from Ona kind of knocked him, like his trajectory off course, and just blew him into the future. I don't know. It is kind of interesting how some cases like that can happen, where it's like, oh yeah, I kind of go to the future by accident, because that kind of happened to Barry a few times. Well, not even that, just going to the future, not. Well, one time he did it by accident, but another one is also like time traveling. Period. He did it by accident in the past, but nevertheless, in particular, when I'm referencing that, I mean traveling to the past, not. Nevertheless. Which is interesting, too, about the whole Doomsday situation in this as well, is that the thing around him, keeping him in, is wearing thin. Like, they're trying to find, because the people who are guarding him, it's like, what we can do is we can leave him in Kandor City when Kandor City is taken, which will mean that you're letting a lot of people die. But I guess it's like, oh, the sacrifice is some to make sure that all of Krypton survives. You know, because even if we are to be doomed in the future, this, like, letting that creature go wild in this state will guarantee destruction. And it's like, for one, they've guarded it for so long. A mistake that wasn't even their own. It was the Zods and Ales that led to that situation in the first place. So it's like, why should we suffer for their mistake? So they're going to take it to Kandor City underneath the tunnels, leave it there. Moment it gets sucked up by Brainiac, it becomes Brainiac's problem. Which, to be fair, like, Doomsday will probably find his way back to Krypton and just be your problem altogether. But we'll see how that all plays out. Like I said, I mean, it might help out in the long run. I mean, because Lyta and Zod want that anyway. But to be fair, it might be a situation where it's like, I mean, because the fact is, if they leave it in the city, it could awaken sooner than expected and just go on a killing spree. It's kind of hard to say. It's actually kind of interesting, really, when you actually think about it. Adam went through so much to try and make sure that the timeline stays the same, but maybe not even just Zod being here, maybe him being here is actually what changed everything, that he kind of set the course. They both did, in their own way, set the course of Krypton forever. as the previews kind of said, without me looking at it, I just saw the bold words that Krypton, like the future is changed forever. So that's why I'm so interested to see this timeline, because it's like, yeah, like in this timeline, I wonder, does Clark in this timeline know that him and Zod are related, that they are family? Because that's, like I said, that's just kind of an interesting development. Like I said, I don't know if that's canonical or not. I feel like maybe it is. Like I said, the whole Brainiac situation, I thought that was just something the show's doing. It's like, no, that's typically canonical to who Brainiac is. Obviously, there's certain deviations that, those deviations being what I know as like the whole him being a supercomputer thing on Krypton, like that was kind of like certain other like deviations from the typical like storyline, which is interesting, obviously, because it's something I've talked about recently. It's the fact is that Superman's origin story is always changing and always kind of being built upon over like the 80 years it's been around. So, but nevertheless, but what we do see at the end is Brainiac. Like, I'm curious how he came to be at the very... I mean, to be fair, we know that he was feeding off the generator of, like, the dome. So I guess it gave him enough... I mean, it was supposed to be energy to specifically for the ship, but I guess it was drained while they were trying to deal with it. Like, enough got drained away that it completely powered down. And so I guess his ship had enough power to get here, because he just pops up. Like, we just see him start forming. I mean, so I guess he kind of materializes himself down, or like the remnants of the voice of Rao formed into Brainiac. Either way, as Brainiac's here on Earth now, so it's going to be interesting, especially if things go down the way the others want, including Lyta and Zod, about like the whole Doomsday situation, which I'm like, I don't know how do you handle that. Like, you think Brainiac's an issue. This is literally the thing that has killed Superman. It's like, how do you stop that? There's no putting that thing back in stasis once it's awakened. So we might see a situation of them like pushing it into an early version of, I mean, because eventually we know at some point in time it gets to Earth to kill Superman at some point in time. So it's kind of like, once again, it's like nothing's 100% set in stone, because we are dealing with time travel here and things are a little wonky and crazy. I'm curious to see if Adam is going to pop up. I would assume he has to, but like, what are things going to be like when he does? Like I said, because he was so set in stone of like, no, we got to make sure that Krypton's story plays out the same way it does. I got to kill Zod, and I got to make sure that Brainiac ends up destroying Krypton. But it's like, ultimately, we'll have to wait and see like what goes on in the next episode. The next episode being the season finale, and I'm so curious to see how this all plays out. What happens with Jaina? What and all of Kandor and Krypton's future has in store. I mean, this is mainly hitting Kandor because the other cities are out there. Oh yeah, let's not forget about like I almost let it slip my mind too. Jakor, the leader of the Black Zero. Gosh. Why she has such a problem with Darren is because basically Darren, like, because she was actually part of the Science Guild and all that stuff. She was actually kind of like Val's successor, interestingly enough. It seems like she basically wanted some information from Darren, because basically, like, they tried to warn him about things, and obviously he didn't listen. And it's like the moment she saw him kill Val, that's when she left, because she knew she'd be like the next one. Interestingly enough, there's this whole I forgot what the exact words, protocol, I think. The whole thing she ended up finding out is like basically in the Genesis chamber is what that was all about, because basically her and Val were basically creating something that would eventually without it, the Genesis project the Genesis chamber kind of wouldn't be where it is right now, and they wouldn't be able to reproduce like they have been. We end up finding out that basically the higher ups in the different named like elites, like top elites in Kandor City, basically cloned themselves, because it's like, well, you know, even if something happens to them, they can always live on forever, and that's kind of what everyone wants, immortality. And you know, so I'm curious to see what Jakor decides to finally do with all of that, because it is a situation of like, will she destroy them to ensure that they elite, or will she try to manifest that into some kind of power? Like, will she like absorb all the energy from them all into power? Because I mean, I'm sure if given a chance, Brainiac would have done that too. I mean, that's kind of what he was doing with the Genesis chamber in the first place. So if you have a crap ton of elites, I mean, I would assume they're all clones of one person. But I mean, each person has one clone, but maybe it's like each of the elites had like a crap ton of clones. So makes you wonder, does she have any in there? I'm sure Darren potentially has some back there too, him being who he is. Which, interestingly enough, last time we see him is he gets crashed out in kind of like that tundra area. So Obviously, he's not dead because he's too much of a snake to die, but I get the feeling like we haven't seen the last of him. In what regard, we'll kind of have to wait and see. I'm also curious, like, even though potentially, like, will we kind of see? I mean, this is kind of stuff that I have to wait till, like, the season finale, like, obviously, to kind of really find out. But I'm curious, will we get a better look at the other cities in Krypton? Like, we hear about them and, like, oh, we need to unite the cities, because even Kandor's just kind of off on his own. We don't even really know what the other cities' relationships are like with each other. Definitely, Kandor's kind of isolated, so it's just kind of an interesting thing. We also hear from Zod that Bao might actually be alive. So it's like, how do you know that? I mean, he is from the future, so maybe he found out that way, like, because no one knows that Bao's alive. I mean, like, I guess it's a situation of like when everyone just assumed he died, but maybe he got injured when he fell, but he just survived the entire time. Because I was wondering if he was trying to reference the whole I'm blinking on it. Fortress of Solitude Val. I thought that's what he was kind of referencing, but I guess not. It's also interesting too because Seg was asking Nissa to kind of go back and kind of shut everything down. I guess the whole point was to make sure that whatever happens with the Fortress of Solitude, shut it all down, kind of erase it, so that if things go bad and Brainiac does take Kandor City, he doesn't have access to all that stuff inside of the Fortress of Solitude. So, like I said, great episode, and I'm so excited to see what goes down next week in the season finale. It's going to be great. I'm so curious to see how this all plays out. But really, that's all I want to talk about in this episode. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.